What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Right Question, and today we're going to be starting off on our journey to learn how to code. Now, we're going to be using a language called C++. Some of you may already be having the question, why not Python or some other language? That's an excellent question, but for now, you're just going to have to take my word for it. In this video, we're going to be covering the following. Where are we going to write C++? How do we use the tools that we have? Semicolons, printing, and understanding errors. So, how does one C++? Well, for starters, let's go on to our website called REPL.it. Now, this is where we're going to be running all of our code. It's a fantastic website that lets you save things day over day without having to have you install a bunch of stuff. Once you get to this website, you'll want to go ahead and click on New REPL, and then we're going to pick our language, C++ 11. Now, what's the difference between these? You can think of C++ 11 as a more upgraded version of C++ that's more modernized. So once we create a new REPL, you'll notice that we have a couple of things available to us here, including a little bit of starter code that they've kind of given to us. But before we really dive into this example code, what I'd like to do is quickly understand exactly how this website works. There's a couple of key aspects of this website. The files, the editor, the terminal, the run and eventually stop buttons, and the share button. The nice thing about the share button is once you click on it, you can just share this link with anyone or yourself, so anyone can come back and kind of see this later on. Let's say you have an issue with your program. You can always just send that link to someone. And once you've sent that link to someone, they can start to understand the same code that you've written. Now, the next aspect. The file section is where you'll have all your files. For now, we're going to stick to just one file called main.cpp. And the reason this is a .cpp file, .cpp is very much like .doc or .txt or .ppt or .xls. Pretty much a standard file extension that most people are familiar with. Just instead of .doc for Microsoft Word or .xls for Microsoft Excel, .cpp stands for this is a CPP file or a C++ file. The main, like any Word document or anything else, could be named anything. You don't have to call this main.cpp, though it is useful if the first file in your program is called main.cpp, and why we'll come back to in the future. The second part of this program is the editor. The editor is where you'll be editing your files. Think of this like Microsoft Word, but for the files on the left-hand side. This editor is pretty much like a regular editor, except it has a couple key features for programming that make things much, much easier to follow along with. For example, it has syntax highlighting. What that means is it's highlighting certain words that are important in C++, or what we call keywords, so it becomes much easier to read. Include and int. Now, you may not know what all of these are, but eventually you will. Secondarily, it has autocomplete, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The next thing it has is a terminal. And what this terminal does is that this terminal is where you'll be interacting with your code. This is where you'll see the outputs of your code, give inputs to your code. It's basically going to be everything that you're going to be interacting with. And of course, we have the run and eventually, as you can see, the stop buttons. What the run button does is it takes your current code over here and tells the computer, I want you to run the code as I've written it. So let's go ahead and press it really fast without pressing the stop button this time. So once I run it, you'll often see two lines of code. One line that represents this, and the second line that represents this. And of course, the third line appears to be what I've typed out over here. Let's explore a little bit. Instead of hello world, let's type in hello YouTube and see what happens to our code when we press the run button now. Ah, fantastic. We're getting exactly what we typed out over here. Now, as some of you may have gathered, this is how to print stuff in C++. Whenever I print stuff in C++, I'm going to be wanting to use std::cout. What does this stand for? Std stands for the standard library, So these are packages people have written for us. So you don't have to write a bunch of code to print stuff out here. Cout stands for console output. So this is the standard way to send data to console output in C++. Console is another word for terminal. And these arrows are like a direction indicator. They're saying send whatever I put on the right-hand side over here into the console as output. No matter what I change this to, I'm learning C++. You will notice that I will print out, or I will output to the console exactly what I've typed. Now you may have noticed that these quotes aren't coming out. That's because for my console output to know exactly what I'm typing, I have to put all of that inside of quotes. So now that we've kind of got the hang of what this line is doing, at least to some degree, and we can make it print out almost anything we want, let's kind of ask a couple more questions. What is the semicolon doing here? Semicolons are the periods of C++. If you try and print something out, so let's print something out saying perhaps it's my first day, and not put a semicolon, one of the things you'll notice is, one, I got a red squiggly underneath this. Kind of like how you get when you spell something wrong in Microsoft Word. So if I hit the run button, you'll notice I won't see I'm learning C++, and I won't just see it's my first day. In fact, I'll get what's called a C++ error. Now, this isn't a bad thing. All this means is that there's a couple of fixes you have to make before you can kind of move forward and actually see what your code outputs. How do we read this error? We're going to read this error the following. So first, we're going to go back to the very top of the error list. So if there are more errors down here, we wouldn't care. We would always go to the very top. Now in this case, we just happen to have one error, so that's very easy to do. Once we see the one error, we're going to want to go and understand what file it's in. So this tells us we're in the main.cpp file. The next segment tells us line 5 is where we need to look for our error. Great. So this is the line we just added. And of course, the last part tells us it's in column 36. So let's go ahead and count. So we're at 1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34,
35, 36. Okay, so now that my cursor is in the right place, I know where I'm looking for my error as well. And then lastly, it says expected semicolon after expression. The run button was reading your code and it was confused because it was thinking you would put a semicolon there, but you didn't. So this is like having a run-on sentence in English where you just didn't put any periods on. Unlike humans, your computer is pretty straightforward and can only do the things exactly as you tell it. So if you miss the period, your computer won't be able to move forward. We're going to go ahead and kind of add the semicolon. Below, it kind of gave me a diagram over here that showed me my line of code and then said the semicolon belongs right over here. So not only did it tell me the error that I was seeing, but it also kind of gave me a visual indicator for how to possibly fix it. These fixes won't always work, and these are just suggestions. And sometimes the computer may say an error that it thought you did, whereas it was actually caused by an error that happened due to some other reason. Those are much more complicated cases, and you, luckily, hopefully, won't be encountering them. But remember, if you do, all you have to do is share the REPL link with someone else, or perhaps on the Slack community, and we'll go ahead and be direct to answering your question. Now that we fixed our error, let's kind of press the run button again. And there we have it. We kind of got I'm learning C++, and it's my first day coming out of console. Now, one of the next things that we need to talk about is what are these two lines for? We will get to this, and we will cover this in the future, but for now you should notice that your program should always start with this at the top of every single file. No matter how many files you create, just always have this in there. What this is exactly, we'll discuss that, but this is just a thing you'll have to memorize for now. Now, this line and this line are kind of interesting. Now, you may have wondered, why did I not just write this down here or write this up here? And as soon as I do that, some of you may have seen that I get a bunch of squigglies. That's because all code in C++ has to belong inside the curly brackets of what we call main. Main is where your program begins. Your program doesn't actually start running from top to down. I can put all sorts of stuff anywhere, and some of it may or may not work. But the first thing you need to do in every single C++ program is go ahead and find this main. Once you find this main, you can then start to know that this is actually where your code begins. So right over here, my code will first do the first thing right after main. Then it's going to do the next thing. And then it's so on and so on until main ends. Once main ends, that's it. Your program is over. It won't do anything below. It won't do anything above. It will do exactly what is in main. Now, you might be wondering what happens with multiple errors. Well, C++ isn't going to stop on the first fault. It's just going to keep on dumping errors until you can see only errors. But all you have to do is scroll to the top and fix the errors one at a time. After we fix the first one, we just hit the run button again and see how much we fixed. Sometimes you'll fix something and you'll see 10 new issues pop up. That doesn't mean you broke something. In fact, sometimes it means you may have fixed something, but fixing it caused C++ to discover even more errors that you actually had. Alternatively, sometimes you might fix something and you might make hundreds of errors disappear. That's really just part of the game. All you have to do is scroll to the top and start fixing errors from the bottom. Just remember, the number of errors you get in your code are in no way an indicator of how good or bad of a programmer you are. The most experienced of programmers experience tons of errors all the time. It's often a joke in most programmers' world if your code works correctly the first time around. If it does work, I'm asking, what am I not doing correctly? And for the last part, here's your assignment. Well, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to create your first C++ file and try and print out some fun facts about yourself. As you print out fun facts, I want you to go ahead and share that link with someone else and kind of have them run the code and see if they're able to kind of replicate the process of running the code that you wrote on their machine. Once you're able to do that, feel free to go ahead and share that on the Slack group. We'll give you some feedback. Well, did you run into any errors? If you did, I want you to write down the following. What was the error? Why did it happen? And how did you go about fixing it? This code might seem very simple, but remember, these assignments are going to build on each other. So the more and more practice you have with the simpler assignments, when we go and build onto it, it will just feel easier and easier, rather than feeling like we're giving you a bunch of work all at once. Now, I'm very excited for our programming journey, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. See you next time. Peace.